He cheated.
I saw him look at my paper.
I did not cheat. I swear I did not.
Chicago, midnight. A strikingly handsome CEO in a navy suit and red tie finds his son frozen under buzzing classroom lights, accused of cheating. In the hallway, a quiet housekeeper's boy slides a sketch card, MAPS. Model, arrange, picture, speak. The pencil steadies, the father's certainty wavers. Can a rhythm drawn in the margins save a grade and a home? The room hummed under old fluorescent lights. Desks in straight rows, winter coats slung over chairs, a wall clock ticking like a metronome no one asked for. Miles Caldwell sat center row, palms flat, pencil set at a perfect angle. For the first time in months, his breaths did not trip over one another. He let the noise fade and fixed his eyes on the sheet. Lines, numbers, words. He traced a quiet rhythm in his head and started to write. He moved question to question. No rush, just steady counts. 1 and 2 and... He drew tiny arrows in the margin, little aisles like the warehouse tours his dad used to give him on Saturdays. Robot lanes, crossroads, dock doors. A private map that made the jumble make sense. A girl 2 rows back coughed. The clock clicked forward. Miles did not flinch. He shaded a small box at the edge of the page and thought, keep the beat. Question 14, weighted at the bottom like a dare. 2 autonomous drones departing from different nodes, different speeds, a wind offset. He pictured the sky grid he had seen at Caldwell Robotics, a pilot screen with moving points. His pencil softened, then sharpened again as he angled the tip. Model the pieces. Arrange the path. Picture the scene. Speak the steps in your head. He did not know those words yet, but the feeling was there. The pencil tapped once. Then he wrote, calm and clean. When he set the pencil down, his hand was not shaking. He checked the name line. He checked the corner he had shaded. He allowed himself one exhale that almost felt like a laugh. Done. Finished with minutes to spare. He slid the packet forward. A murmur rose before the papers even reached the front. Mr. Ellery, tall, gray suit, proctor badge firm as a rule, gathered the stack. He paused at Miles's test. His eyes moved fast, then slower, then back to the top. He did not look up. Sir, a voice near the window whispered, loud enough to travel. He never finishes. Ellery placed the stack on the desk and lifted only one packet again. Miles watched his own name in Ellery's hand like a thing he had not earned. The room went quiet. Mr. Caldwell, Ellery said, level as a line. Stand. Miles stood. The clock ticked, bright and cruel. He could feel the light pressing against his forehead like heat. You finished early, Ellery said, after failing 3 consecutive timed evaluations. Remarkable. It clicked, Miles said. His voice sounded smaller than he meant it to. Ellery held up the last page. Question 14. Complex relative motion, variable wind. Your solution is neat. Very neat. He set the test down, palm on it like a stamp. You can reproduce it. On the board. Now. A chair scraped. Someone sucked in a breath. As Patel. The math teacher sitting along the wall for accommodations review shifted slightly. Her eyes were soft, alert. Let him take a moment, she said, calm. Transitioning under these lights can... This is a standard integrity check, Ellery replied. We will simply observe the method he claims is his. Miles's feet felt far away as he walked to the front. The whiteboard was too clean. The glare from the lamp above made it a mirror. He held the dry erase marker and tried to remember how to hold it without shaking. The cap clicked off. The sound echoed in his head like a drop in a deep well. He searched for the shape that had steadied him. In the margin, he had drawn 2 small squares connected by arrows. He pictured them now. Node A, Node B. He pictured wind lines crossing the grid, like strings on a guitar. If he could just put the pieces in order, he could speak them back. Begin, Ellery said. Miles opened his mouth. Air stalled in his chest. The light flared white at the edge of his vision. He pressed the marker to the board and tried to ground himself with the tiniest tap of the tip. 1 and 2 and the beat skittered away. "Model the pieces," Ms. Patel said quietly, almost to herself, but it landed like a rope near a ledge. 2 drones, he told himself, A and B. He wrote the letters in small, steady strokes. He drew a dot for A, a dot for B. He drew a line for wind. The marker squeaked. Ellery's voice stayed even. "State your assumptions as you go. No leaps." Miles swallowed. "Assume drone A launches at 8. Drone B at 8:05. A's velocity is higher by 10 meters per second." He could hear his own breathing again. Not steady, but not spiraling yet. "Proceed," Ellery said. Miles lifted the marker, stared at the blank between the dots, and felt the room shrink. The clock ticked louder. The glare thickened. The rhythm slipped from his fingers. He saw only the white, not the path. The marker hovered, frozen over the space where the answer should live. "To the board," Ellery repeated, softer but closer. "Question 14. Show us now." The black Mercedes S-Class slid to a quiet stop in front of the tower on Lakeshore Drive. Adrian Caldwell stepped out, the city's night breeze catching the edges of his navy suit. He moved with precision, a man whose days and hours were scheduled in blocks, whose life looked seamless from a distance. Inside, his muscles carried the tension of decisions that had shaped industries, and of one truth he kept folded tight. Control was survival. He crossed the marble lobby, returned clipped nods, and entered the private elevator. The ride up was silent, the kind of silence that asked to be filled but wasn't. The penthouse opened with a touch of his card. Glass walls framed Chicago's skyline, steel and glass reflecting city light. The air inside was polished, untouched, like a gallery where no one dared move a frame. On the dining table sat a paper, folded once. Adrian saw the red mark through the crease before he unfolded it. He did not look at the numbers or the teacher's comments, his eyes fixed on the name at the top. Miles Caldwell, his son, 16, and at the bottom corner an F. The sound of a video game leaked faintly from the far room. Adrian held the paper at his side and walked until he reached the doorway. Miles sat on the edge of his bed, screen glow on his face, controller slack in his hands though he wasn't playing. He looked up once, then down again. Adrian's deep blue eyes took in every detail. The slouched posture, the way Miles tapped his fingers against his leg, the faint smudges under his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. "You didn't even look at it," Miles muttered. "I don't need to," Adrian said. His voice was smooth, firm, final. "The grade says enough." Miles clenched the controller. "It's not like I didn't try." "Effort without results is noise," Adrian replied. He set the paper on the desk, perfectly squared with the corner. "One more failure like this, Miles, and you're transferring to Ironbrook Leadership Academy." Miles's head jerked up. "Ironbrook? That's military school." "It's a program for discipline," Adrian corrected. "For structure. For young men who need to understand that control brings clarity. You will have no screens, no distractions, only routine and rigor." Miles felt heat crawl up his neck. "That's exile. You're just sending me away." Adrian's jawline set tighter, but his tone stayed level. "I'm giving you a chance to reset, to become the man you can be. Discipline first, everything else follows." Miles's words cracked when he tried to speak. "You don't even see me. You just see grades." Adrian's thick eyebrows drew slightly inward. For a moment, something shifted in his eyes, but he smoothed it away, leaving only that confident smile he wore for boardrooms and headlines. He placed his hand on the back of the chair, not on his son's shoulder. "You have potential, but potential without results is wasted. Do not waste this chance." He turned, his frame filling the doorway before stepping back into the polished silence of the penthouse. The paper lay where he had set it, like a verdict. The city outside glimmered, steel towers reaching up, cold and precise. Miles sat alone, the glow of the screen dimming as the console timed out. He pulled his knees to his chest and stared at the red letter through the doorway. His father's words rang louder than the city noise. One more failure. Ironbrook. Discipline. Exile. He pressed his forehead against his arm and whispered into the fabric of his sleeve, "You don't even know me." In the hallway, Adrian stopped by the window, hands on the polished steel railing. He watched headlights streak across Lakeshore Drive below. His reflection looked back at him, strong, unflinching, a man who bent chaos into order. But beneath the glass, for the first time in years, a trace of doubt pressed against his chest. The first light of dawn crept across the penthouse hallway, a pale stripe breaking through the blinds. The sound of a rolling housekeeping cart whispered against the marble. Mrs. Morales moved quietly, her hands swift but careful, tidying surfaces no one touched, polishing steel already spotless. Behind her trailed Kai, her 13-year-old son, sketchbook hugged tight against his chest. He wasn't supposed to be here. His mother had warned him a dozen times, but the long hallways and wide windows pulled at him. And Miles was always around, in fragments of sound. Footsteps across tile, music played too soft, the squeak of pencil erasers. Kai noticed things without trying. Patterns, repeats, signals that no one else seemed to catch. As his mother knelt to empty a wastebasket, Kai slowed, watching through the half-open door to Miles's room. Miles sat at his desk, 3 pencils lined up perfectly from darkest to lightest. Not for art, he hadn't touched his sketchpad once. He just needed them that way. He adjusted the erasers until they matched edges. His shoulders hunched, waiting for the HVAC unit to click. When it did, a sharp metallic pop, he flinched almost invisibly. Then he cracked open the balcony door, only an inch, as if air itself could calm the storm pressing down. Kai tilted his head, curious. He drew his own line on the sketchbook margin. Dark to light, click to open. Observation, like a scientist with field notes. Miles reached for a worksheet. Robotics diagrams sprawled across it. Autonomous drones, warehouse nodes, cargo paths. For a moment, his eyes lit, recognition sparking. He whispered under his breath, tracing his finger along the arrows. He could explain the diagram to anyone. But then the kitchen clock chimed from down the hall, and his hand froze. His chest tightened. The lines blurred, the letters smeared in his mind. The pencil trembled, then fell. He pressed his palms into his temples and let out a frustrated groan. Kai drew another line in his sketchbook. Clear. Then fog. The sequence mattered, he thought. Light, sound, time. They stacked like layers until they pushed Miles off balance. Kai didn't know the word for it, but he knew the rhythm of the collapse. And he knew rhythms could be rewritten. Mrs. Morales straightened, glanced back, and caught him watching. Her eyes sharpened. "Kai," she whispered, low but firm. "Stay with me." Kai closed the sketchbook fast, nodding. But the picture was already there, etched on the page. A boy trying to solve problems his mind could explain perfectly, until the world around him scrambled the code. Later, when the hallway fell silent again, Kai lingered near the kitchen. Miles shuffled past, shoulders bowed, paper crumpled in his hand. He didn't see Kai, didn't see the way Kai's eyes followed the rhythm of his steps. 3 fast, 2 slow, then stop to breathe, like a drumbeat falling apart mid-song. Kai opened his sketchbook once more, pencil racing. He drew a simple box, an arrow, then another box. He shaded the edges, added tick marks like counts. A tiny map, not of streets, but of steps. He wrote one word under it, route. He looked down the hall where Miles had gone and thought, maybe he needs a new rhythm. Maybe he needs a map. Mrs. Morales returned and touched her son's shoulder. "Don't get involved," she murmured, her voice weary. We're just here to work. Kai closed the sketchbook slowly. I know, he said, but his eyes flicked once more toward the closed door of Miles's room. Behind it, a boy struggled in silence, and Kai felt the weight of a pattern only he could see. The classroom buzzed with the steady hum of lights, the faint shuffle of papers, and the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. Miles sat rigid at his desk, a robotics diagram spread before him. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing, tracing the pathways of 2 drones navigating a warehouse grid. His lips moved silently, shaping explanations only he could hear. If Drone A departs here, and Drone B departs 5 minutes later. His hand gestured mid-air, sketching paths like invisible lines. For a heartbeat, clarity bloomed. He could see it all: nodes, sequences, intersections. The system made sense. But then the overhead light flickered. The clock's second hand clicked louder. Pressure rushed in like a wave. Words that had been sharp dulled into blur. The diagrams swam. His chest tightened. His pencil slipped from his fingers, rolling across the desk. Miles's mind went blank. The answer dissolved, leaving only noise. "Mr. Caldwell?" Ms. Patel's voice was gentle, not sharp like the others. She leaned over, her sari sleeves brushing the desk as she studied his paper. She saw the steps he had started, accurate, precise, confident. Then, a sudden derailment, jagged lines veering into nonsense right at the densest block of print. "Take a breath," she whispered, her tone steady, like an anchor against the storm. "You know this." Miles tried. Air filled his lungs but refused to stay. His eyes darted to the clock again. Time kept moving. His thoughts stayed stuck. He pressed his palms flat on the desk, sweat dampening the paper. "I can't." His voice cracked. Ms. Patel touched the corner of the page. "Your work here is correct." She pointed to the start, where the sequence held strong. "This," she tapped the brake, "isn't about knowledge. Something else interrupts you." He shook his head, ashamed. "I just choke." She studied him for a long second, then lowered her voice. "Maybe it's not choking. Maybe it's the environment. The glare, the noise, the pressure. That's not your fault, Miles." He swallowed hard. No teacher had ever said that. They only said, try harder, focus more, don't lose control. But here, Ms. Patel spoke as if the problem wasn't him. It was the conditions crushing him. The door at the back creaked. Mr. Ellery, the proctor, stepped in, clipboard in hand. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Miles before moving on. He saw only a student stalled, not the storm inside his chest. He marked something down without a word. Miles clenched his fists, furious at himself. He knew this material. He could build it, explain it, even teach it if the world went quiet for just a moment. But under these lights, with the seconds drumming in his ears, his mind betrayed him. He stared down at the half-finished diagram and felt the weight of failure coil around his shoulders again. Later, alone in the empty classroom, Ms. Patel lingered at the desk. She picked up Miles's scratch paper. The steps were sharp, logical, strong, until the page darkened with frantic looping marks. Right at the moment the light above had flickered. Right when the clock had ticked loudest. She held the page in her hands and thought, this boy isn't broken. He's overwhelmed. If only someone could give him a method to steady the rhythm, to cut through the noise. Meanwhile, down the hall, Miles walked with his head low, crumpled paper in his fist. Shame throbbed with each step, louder than the clock, heavier than the grade. He muttered under his breath, I'll never get it right. But in the shadows, Kai watched, sketchbook pressed to his chest. He had seen it all. The light, the noise, the break. He traced a rhythm on the cover with his fingers like a drummer keeping time. He knew patterns could shift. He just wasn't sure if Miles was ready to hear it yet. That night, the penthouse was quiet except for the distant hum of the city. Miles sat at his desk, shoulders slumped, a test prep booklet open but untouched. The lamp above him cast a glare that made the words crawl across the page. His pencil rolled between his fingers, useless. When he stepped away for water, Kai slipped into the room. His sneakers barely made a sound against the polished floor. He glanced once over his shoulder to be sure his mother wasn't near, then pulled a sticky note from his sketchbook. On it, he had drawn a tiny route map. Boxes, arrows, and small drumbeat marks like the rhythms he tapped out on tabletops. A path through the confusion. He pressed it gently onto Miles's desk right where the pencil had been. When Miles returned, he saw the note instantly. He froze. A crumpled frustration tightened in his chest. He peeled it off, unfolded it, and stared at the little diagram. Arrows, beats, a strange scaffolding for word problems. His jaw clenched. He knew exactly who had left it. The housekeeper's kid. The boy who wandered hallways like a ghost, eyes always watching, sketchbook in hand. Miles felt heat rise in his cheeks. Did Kai think he needed pity? That a genius in the shadows could hand him some miracle fix? He crushed the note in his palm until the edges dug into his skin. Then, with a sharp breath, he tossed it into the trash. The paper landed softly but final, buried beneath worksheets he hadn't finished. The next morning, Kai lingered by the cart as his mother cleaned. He glanced toward the desk and saw only the corner of the sticky note poking out of the bin. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. He'd expected it, maybe. Pride was thicker than walls in this house. Miles, meanwhile, sat at breakfast, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his oatmeal. Adrian sat across from him, suit crisp, red tie knotted perfectly. The silence between them was more solid than the marble counter. "You're late on your prep schedule again," Adrian said without looking up from his tablet. "I had my assistant draft a stricter routine." Miles stirred the oatmeal, appetite gone. What if I just can't do it like you think?" Adrian's deep blue eyes lifted, steady and sharp. "There's no can't. There's only will or won't. You won't waste your potential." Miles pressed his lips together. He wanted to say he wasn't wasting it, that his mind shorted under lights, that numbers blurred when time pressed too close. But the words tangled in his throat. He just nodded once, small and hollow. Kai, from the hallway, caught the exchange. He held his sketchbook tighter. He had seen Miles's rhythm collapse, and he knew the pattern could be shifted. But how do you offer help to someone who refuses to take it? Later that evening, Miles sat at his desk again, trying another practice test. The seconds ticked, and again his pencil faltered. He gripped the edge of the paper so hard it tore. The room spun with shame. He whispered to himself, angry, "I don't need anyone's help." But in the trash, beneath torn pages, the sticky note waited, its faint arrows and tiny drum marks still visible if one looked close enough. A quiet reminder that someone had noticed the pattern. Someone who saw a map where he saw only walls. Miles never pulled it out, not yet. Pride was heavier than panic, and panic was winning. The practice test lay across Miles's desk, another red slash bleeding across the page. He stared at it until the lines blurred. 3 attempts, 3 collapses. His heart thudded in his chest, not from the math, but from the echo of his father's words. "One more failure, and you're gone." Down the hall, Adrian Caldwell adjusted his cufflinks, readying for a late dinner with investors. He looked every inch the striking CEO. Broad-shouldered, square jawline, deep blue eyes steady as steel. When he saw the test in Miles's hand, his expression barely shifted. "Again," he said flatly. Miles swallowed. "I tried." "Trying without progress," Adrian interrupted, "is wasted energy." His voice never rose, but the precision of it cut deeper than shouting. He tapped the paper once, then checked his watch. "My assistant will finalize Ironbrook's enrollment. It's the structure you clearly need." Miles froze. The word Ironbrook hit like a gavel. Military routines, cold dormitories, no freedom, no music, no sketching patterns in the margins, just drills, just exile. His breath hitched. You're already sending me? I warned you. Adrian's tone held no anger, only the certainty of a man delivering a verdict. Control is everything. You don't have it. Miles's throat tightened. You don't even care what I see, what I feel. You just... Adrian's jawline hardened, cutting off the words. Enough. He slipped on his coat, navy fabric catching the light. Failure ends here. At Ironbrook, discipline will succeed where your excuses do not. The elevator doors closed behind him with a metallic thud. Silence expanded in his wake, heavy and suffocating. Miles sat on the edge of his bed, fists clenched. His chest burned with shame, hotter than anger. He's already given up on me. He's sending me away. He pressed his forehead against his knees, whispering into the dark, I don't want to go. In the hallway, Kai stood half hidden in shadow, his mother's cart parked at the far end. He had heard enough. Ironbrook, discipline, failure. He hugged his sketchbook tight, eyes wide. He knew Miles's pride had burned his offer before, but now pride seemed smaller than panic. Kai's hand tightened around his pencil. He could almost hear the rhythm Miles had tried to keep. If someone didn't help him now, the rhythm would vanish completely. Later that night, Miles scrolled through the Ironbrook website on his phone. Pictures of stone walls and cadets marching in rows stared back at him. His stomach turned. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine living there, tried to imagine himself in those stiff uniforms. All he felt was dread. His breath grew shallow. He threw the phone across the bed and whispered to the ceiling, I can't do this. The city lights glowed through the balcony door, cracked open as always. Cold air brushed his face, but it didn't calm him this time. He pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders, listening to the hum of HVAC, the clicks of pipes, every sound like a hammer in his chest. In the kitchen, Mrs. Morales rinsed dishes quietly. She glanced at Kai, who lingered by the counter, sketchbook still clutched to his chest. Don't get involved, she said, tired but firm. This isn't our place. Kai nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed down the hall. He could hear faint movements, restless pacing. He tapped a rhythm on the cover of his sketchbook, soft as a heartbeat. 1 and 2 and... He whispered under his breath, he doesn't need a drill. He needs a map. For the first time, Kai decided he wouldn't stay in the shadows. Not if Ironbrook was the alternative. The penthouse lay in near darkness, the city lights outside casting fractured patterns across the glass walls. Miles sat hunched at his desk, papers spread like a battlefield. His pencil hovered over the page, unmoving. He had tried again and again, but the numbers blurred into nothing. His chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. He pressed his fists into his temples, whispering, I can't. I just can't. A faint sound made him lift his head, a soft shuffle of sneakers. In the doorway stood Kai, clutching his sketchbook. He looked smaller than the shadows around him, but his eyes were steady. He stepped forward slowly, as though approaching a cornered animal. Miles stiffened. What are you doing here? Kai slid something from between the pages of his sketchbook, a simple card. He placed it on the desk, careful not to touch the scattered papers. This isn't answers, he said quietly. It's a way to keep the panic from swallowing you. Miles narrowed his eyes. I don't need pity. It's not pity. Kai's voice was calm, low, like a steady drumbeat. It's rhythm. Miles glanced down at the card. 4 letters written in bold pencil. M-A-P-S. Below them, 4 words. Model. Arrange, picture, speak. Kai pointed to the first. Model. Name the pieces. Don't solve yet. Just name what you've got. Arrange. Draw the path like boxes in a warehouse. Picture. Sketch the scene in your head. And speak. Say the steps out loud, like counts in a beat. His finger tapped the table, 1 and 2 and. You don't memorize numbers, you conduct them. Miles stared, the words circling in his mind. His pride prickled. Help from the housekeeper's kid? But something in Kai's tone wasn't condescending. It was matter-of-fact, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to hand over a tool. "And you think this will fix everything?" Miles asked, voice sharp. "No," Kai shrugged. "But it might keep you steady long enough to show what you already know. That's the part no one sees." Miles picked up the card, tracing the letters with his thumb. "Maps," he muttered. He wanted to toss it away, like the sticky note, but his father's threat echoed, "Ironbrook." The word clawed at his chest. He set the card down again, less harsh this time. "Fine. Show me." Kai pulled a practice problem from the pile, 2 trains on parallel tracks. He slid it toward Miles. "Model. What do you see?" Miles frowned. "Train A, Train B, speeds, distance." "Arrange," Kai prompted. Reluctantly, Miles drew 2 lines on scratch paper, points marked A and B, arrows showing direction. "Picture," Kai said. "Close your eyes for just a second. Imagine them moving. Where are they?" Miles let his eyelids fall. He saw tracks stretching out, 2 trains pushing forward. When he opened his eyes, he sketched tiny rectangles, one slightly ahead. "Now, speak," Kai urged. "Say the steps, like beats." 1 and 2, and. Miles's voice stumbled, but he tried. "Train A leaves here, 1 and 2, and. Train B starts here, 1 and 2, and." He wrote the calculation in time with the rhythm. When the answer came out clean, Miles blinked. His chest didn't feel tight. His hand wasn't shaking. He almost laughed. "Wait, it worked?" Kai grinned, the first real smile Miles had ever seen from him. "Told you, you don't choke. You just need rhythm." For a moment, the silence in the penthouse felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating. Miles sat back, holding the card like it was more valuable than any textbook. "Maps," he whispered again. Maybe I can do this." Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, 2 boys sat across from each other, one learning to breathe steady, the other quietly steadying him. The clock on Miles's desk glowed past midnight, but for once he wasn't drowning in dread. He sat upright, pencil in hand, a problem in front of him. Kai leaned across the desk, his sketchbook open but untouched, watching. The room was hushed except for the soft scratch of graphite and the rhythm Miles whispered under his breath. "Model. Arrange. Picture. Speak." He marked drones as dots, sketched arrows like airways across a grid. He counted beats as if he were keeping time with a metronome. His heart didn't race ahead. His thoughts didn't collapse. For the first time, the problem unfolded step by step, calm and clear. Miles blinked at the neat solution and let out a startled laugh. The sound surprised even him. I finished it." His voice cracked with something between relief and disbelief. Kai grinned, tapping the desk. "Do another." They ran through 3 more. Each time, Miles's hand steadied. His voice grew firmer. The panic that usually clawed at him when the seconds passed didn't come. Instead, his chest loosened. His head stayed clear. At the 4th solution, Miles dropped his pencil, leaned back, and laughed again, louder this time. "I can actually do this." His eyes gleamed in a way Kai hadn't seen before. "That's the point," Kai said. "You always could. You just needed a way to keep the rhythm." Miles looked at him, the pride in his chest still fragile. "But what if it breaks again? What if the beat slips and I crash?" Kai shrugged, calm as ever. "Then you pick it back up. It's like music. You don't quit when you miss a note. You keep counting. That's how you finish the song." Miles sat in silence, staring at the answers on the page. His hand brushed the map's card once, almost reverently. His voice was quieter when he spoke again. "I thought I was broken." "You're not," Kai said simply. "You just needed a different map." For a long moment, they stayed like that. The hum of the city beyond the glass, the balcony door open an inch, and the faintest rhythm of pencil taps echoing like a drumline only they could hear. Miles closed his eyes and let the beat steady him. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was failing. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was enough. Across the hall, Mrs. Morales folded towels into perfect rectangles. She paused when she heard Miles's laughter drift through the quiet. She glanced toward her son's empty bed, sighed, and shook her head. She should call him back, remind him to keep distance. But she didn't. Some rules, she knew, could bend when a boy found his rhythm again. Miles picked up the pencil one last time, tapped it in time, 1 and 2 and. He smiled down at the page. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm going to try again. And this time, I'm not afraid." Kai leaned back, satisfied. "Good," he said softly. "That's the win that matters." The next morning, Miles sat at his desk in Ms. Patel's classroom. The buzz of fluorescent lights was still there, but he pressed a pencil edge lightly into his palm, grounding himself. On the corner of his scratch paper, he wrote 4 letters in neat block print. M-A-P-S. Nothing more. No diagrams copied from Kai's card, no hidden notes. Just the scaffold. Miss Patel's eyes caught the letters. She tilted her head, curious, but said nothing. She simply noted the calm in his breathing, the steadiness of his hand. Miles glanced once toward the back row where Kai had slipped in early, sketchbook resting on his lap. Kai didn't look up, but his fingers tapped a rhythm against the cardboard cover, 1 and 2 and. It was a silent reminder, not a crutch. Ms. Patel approached Miles's desk before the test began. She bent slightly, her voice quiet enough only he could hear. "This card, M-A-P-S. You'll use it only as a blank frame, not the answers, not a script, just a rhythm to keep you steady. Understood?" Miles nodded, throat tight. "Understood." She straightened and addressed the class. "All right, begin." The room filled with the sound of pencil scratching. For the first time, Miles didn't freeze when the timer started. He whispered under his breath, inaudible but certain. "Model. Arrange. Picture. Speak." His hand moved smoothly across the page. At the back, Kai looked up from his sketchbook, just long enough to see Miles's pencil flying across the paper. A small smile curved at the corner of his mouth. Then he went back to his own drawings, tapping out the beat. By the second page, sweat beaded on Miles's forehead, but he didn't spiral. When his chest tightened, he pressed the pencil edge into his palm again and recentered. The beat held. The answers came. Miss Patel circled the room, watching. She paused by Miles's desk, her eyes scanning his work. Precise, orderly, no panicked scribbles. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened. When time was called, Miles set his pencil down, lungs emptying in one long breath. He glanced at the letters in the corner of his paper, M-A-P-S, and touched them with his fingertip. Not a crutch, a compass. Later, as the class filed out, Miss Patel lingered by the doorway. She caught Miles's shoulder gently. "Whatever you did differently today," she said, her voice low, "hold on to it. That structure you built, it's not cheating. It's strategy, and strategy is what thinkers do." Miles swallowed, blinking fast. "It's not just mine," he admitted. "Someone showed me Mr. Patel studied his face, then glanced toward Kai, who hovered by the lockers, sketchbook tucked under his arm. Her eyes softened further, but she said nothing. Instead, she placed a reassuring hand on Miles's shoulder. "Then be sure to thank them, and keep building on it." Miles nodded, heart pounding. Not from panic, but from possibility. He felt something inside him settle. Maybe he wasn't broken. Maybe he'd just needed a map all along. As he walked down the hall, he saw Kai waiting. For a moment, their eyes met. Miles didn't speak, but he gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. Kai returned it with a tap of his fingers against his sketchbook, the rhythm steady as ever. For the first time, Miles felt like he could breathe in this building. The walls didn't press in quite so tightly. The lights didn't hum quite so cruelly. He carried maps with him, not on paper, but inside, where no proctor could take it away. The classroom brimmed with tension as the second midterm began. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, louder than ever, but Miles pressed the sharpened edge of his pencil into his palm. The tiny sting grounded him. He whispered in his head, steady and soft, "Model, arrange, picture, speak." He sketched small drone icons, arrows tracing flight paths, bridge lines connecting nodes. His hand moved with rhythm, not rush. 1 and 2 and. His heartbeat matched the count. For once, the ticking clock didn't feel like a hammer. It was just another beat in the pattern. Minutes passed. Pages filled. When he shaded the final box and set his pencil down, there was still time on the clock. He sat back, chest rising with a controlled breath. He wasn't broken. He wasn't stuck. He had finished. A murmur ran through the room. Whispers spread from desk to desk. Caldwell finished? Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. Mr. Ellery's gaze landed on him, sharp and unforgiving. He strode down the aisle, lifted Miles's paper with one hand and scanned it. His face revealed nothing. Then he spoke, voice clipped and cold. "Caldwell, to the board. Question 14. The whispers turned into a hush. Chairs creaked as students shifted to see. Miles's stomach knotted, but he stood. The pencil edge still marked his palm. He held onto it, walking toward the front as though the steps themselves had rhythm. 1 and 2 and. The whiteboard gleamed too bright under the overhead lamp. The marker squeaked as he uncapped it. For a moment, panic threatened. His throat closed, his chest tightened. But then he pressed his thumb against the faint indentation in his palm. He heard Kai's voice in memory. "You don't memorize numbers, you conduct them." He drew 2 small dots. "Model," he said, steady enough for the class to hear. 2 drones, A and B, departing at different times. He sketched lines forward. "Arrange, flight paths across nodes." His hand steadied as he drew arrows, crossing where the drones would meet. "Picture." He paused, closing his eyes briefly. He saw the warehouse grid, drones in motion, just like the simulations at Caldwell Robotics. He opened his eyes and drew the connection. "Speak." He counted softly under his breath like a drumbeat. 1 and 2 and. A departs at 8 o'clock, B at 8:05. Speeds offset by 10 meters per second. Intersection point at node 7. Meeting time, 8:17. He capped the marker and stepped back. The board showed the sequence, clear and clean, each step visible. The silence in the room was heavy, but not hostile, astonished. Ellery's jaw worked once. He gave the smallest nod, curt and reluctant. "Return to your seat." Miles's legs felt weightless as he walked back. His chest was pounding, but not from fear, from triumph. He had held the rhythm under the harshest light. Kai, at the back, tapped his fingers once against his sketchbook, just loud enough for Miles to hear. 1 and 2 and. The beat was still theirs. The room was so quiet Miles could hear his own heartbeat echo in his ears as he slid back into his seat. Students whispered in clusters, but no one dared speak too loudly after Mr. Ellery's clipped nod. For the first time in years, Miles didn't sit with his head bowed in shame. He sat upright, shoulders square, pencil still warm in his hand. Ellery gathered the tests, his face stern as stone. He gave no praise, only procedure, but the smallest nod had been enough. Miles had proven it. He hadn't cheated. He hadn't frozen. He had shown every step, live, under the hardest conditions. When the bell rang, students filed out in a rush of chatter. A few glanced at him, some curious, some skeptical, but no one accused him again. Ms. Patel lingered by the desk, eyes soft with quiet pride. She didn't need to say anything. The way she carried herself told him she had always believed he had more to give. Miles walked the hall like someone learning how to breathe again. His steps felt steadier, almost rhythmic. In the corner, Kai waited, sketchbook pressed against his chest. Their eyes met. Miles didn't smile. He wasn't ready for that, but he lifted his chin once, an unspoken thanks. Kai responded with a tap of his fingers, one and two end, before slipping away down the hall. That evening, the Caldwell penthouse glowed with the city skyline, but inside, the air was tense. Adrian Caldwell arrived home, his custom suit jacket perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable. He set his briefcase on the counter and turned toward his son, who stood by the dining table, test results folded in his hand. "Well?" Adrian's deep voice carried authority, even in a single word. Miles unfolded the paper and slid it across the table. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Adrian picked it up. His striking blue eyes scanned the numbers, scores tallied, percentages printed. He paused. Top 3 in the class. He lowered the page slowly and looked at his son. How? Miles's throat went dry. For weeks he had lived under the threat of Ironbrook, the weight of his father's judgment. Now he held proof in his hands, but the victory wasn't his alone. He drew a breath and pointed toward the kitchen doorway. Kai stood there, half hidden, sketchbook clutched to his chest. His dark eyes flicked between father and son, uncertain if he should even be in the room. "It was him," Miles said, voice steadier than he felt. "Kai showed me a way to keep my head clear. Maps, model, arrange, picture, speak. It's his." Adrian's gaze turned, locking on the boy in the doorway. For a moment, the powerful CEO looked almost startled. Kai shifted on his feet, his mother's warnings echoing in his head. He wasn't supposed to cross that line. He wasn't supposed to get involved. But Miles's voice carried on, quiet but firm. "You wanted discipline. I needed a rhythm. He gave me one." The silence in the penthouse was absolute. Adrian looked from his son's earnest face to the boy holding a scuffed sketchbook, then back again. Something shifted behind his confident smile, a crack in the wall he had built around control. For the first time, Adrian Caldwell didn't see failure. He saw his son standing straighter, claiming his own voice, and giving credit to someone else. The next morning, the Caldwell penthouse brimmed with tension. Adrian sat at the head of the dining table, navy suit immaculate, red tie knotted sharp. Miles sat across from him, test paper folded neatly, though its score had already been seen. The silence between them was heavier than the Chicago skyline pressing in from the glass walls. Finally, Adrian spoke. His voice was calm, but edged with demand. "Explain it to me. How did you go from failure to third in your class?" Miles's fingers tightened on the folded paper. He thought of hiding the truth, of claiming it was sheer effort. But he glanced toward the kitchen, where Kai stood just outside the doorway, sketchbook clutched like a shield. Something inside Miles resisted the lie. He lifted his chin. "I didn't do it alone," he said. His voice was clear, if a little shaky. "Kai helped me. He saw what no one else did." Adrian's deep blue eyes shifted to the boy at the doorway. Kai froze. For a moment, the CEO looked every inch the commanding figure he was. Muscular frame, strong jawline, eyes sharp as glass. "You," Adrian said, his tone unreadable. "Step forward." Mrs. Morales appeared behind her son, alarm flashing across her face. "Mr. Caldwell, please. He meant no harm. He just wanted to—" Adrian lifted a hand, silencing her without raising his voice. His eyes stayed locked on Kai. "What did you give my son?" Kai swallowed hard, then slid the scuffed card forward across the polished table. His voice was quiet but steady. "Not answers. A method. Maps? Model, arrange, picture, speak." He already knew the work. He just needed a way to steady the rhythm. Miles leaned in, urgency in his tone. "Dad, it wasn't cheating. It was the only reason I could show what I really know. Without him, I'd be at Ironbrook right now." Adrian's jaw worked, the muscle ticking once. He turned the card over in his hand as if expecting hidden formulas, but there was nothing, only 4 words, written in pencil. He set it down carefully, eyes narrowing in thought. "And you," Adrian said, his gaze pinning Kai. "How did you see this?" Kai hesitated, then opened his sketchbook. Pages flipped, filled with patterns, arrows showing Miles's breathing rates, tiny sketches of desks, notes on the HVAC clicks, marks for the way Miles lined up pencils. "I just watched," he admitted. "The rhythm broke the same way every time. I thought, maybe if he had a map, he could keep the beat." Adrian studied the sketches, his stern expression faltering just slightly. These weren't childish doodles, they were observations, patterns, truths no one else had noticed. He looked back at his son, who sat straighter now, no longer shrinking under judgment. "You're saying," Adrian murmured slowly, "that the difference between collapse and success was not willpower, but method." "Yes," Miles said firmly, "and trust. I had to trust someone else. I had to admit I couldn't do it alone." The words hung in the air like a quiet challenge. Adrian, a man who had built an empire on control, discipline, and solitary strength, found himself staring at 2 boys, one his son, the other a housekeeper's child, who had dismantled that certainty in a single night. Mrs. Morales stepped forward, her voice low, protective. "Mr. Caldwell, if there's any punishment, it falls on me. I should never have let Kai," but Adrian shook his head, a slow, deliberate gesture. His confident smile flickered, softer now. He looked at Kai, then at Miles. "No punishment," he said. His voice had changed, less like a verdict, more like a concession. "What I see here is not defiance, it's innovation." Miles's shoulders loosened, relief breaking through. Kai lowered his sketchbook slightly, though his eyes stayed cautious. For the first time in years, Adrian Caldwell, CEO, disciplinarian, father, was forced to admit that control was not the same as leadership. And leadership at home, he realized, might begin with listening. The press conference hall gleamed with chrome and glass. Cameras lined up like soldiers. Caldwell Robotics had just unveiled its newest line of autonomous warehouse drones, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jotted notes, lenses clicked, the city of Chicago watching through live feeds. At the podium stood Adrian Caldwell, tall, broad-shouldered, every inch the striking CEO in his tailored navy suit and red tie. His deep blue eyes swept the room with practiced confidence. Normally, this was his kingdom, but today his prepared script lay untouched on the lectern. "Before I speak on innovation," Adrian began, his voice carrying steady across the room, "I need to speak on something more important." A ripple moved through the audience. This wasn't the polished line they expected. Adrian's gaze softened as he glanced toward the front row. Miles sat there, posture upright, pride flickering behind nerves. Beside him, Kai held his scuffed sketchbook, half hidden in his lap. "For years," Adrian continued, "I believed that discipline alone created results, that control was the answer to every failure." He paused, the silence weighty. "I was wrong." Reporters froze mid-scribble. Cameras zoomed closer. "My son Miles has always had the intelligence," Adrian said, his voice steady but threaded with emotion. "But intelligence needs space to breathe, rhythm, a method that doesn't crush under pressure. And that method, MAPS, was not born in a boardroom." He gestured to the boy in the front row. It was seen by Kai Morales, the son of one of our employees. He noticed what others missed. He turned panic into clarity with nothing but a pencil, a sketchbook, and patience. Gasps and murmurs swept through the hall. Adrian Caldwell, a man known for control and secrecy, was naming a child from the staff's quarters in front of the world. "So, today," Adrian went on, his voice firm, "I announce the Caldwell Fellows Program. scholarships for children of our employees and for youth in Chicago neighborhoods who learn differently, visually, rhythmically, spatially. We will fund weekend labs where they can explore robotics without fear of failure, and at Miles's school, we'll retrofit testing spaces, glare-free lighting, quieter rooms, so no student is crushed by conditions instead of measured by knowledge. The room erupted. Flashes, questions, astonished looks. But Adrian's eyes weren't on the cameras. They were on Miles, who sat straighter, pride breaking through like sunlight after rain, and on Kai, who stared wide-eyed, clutching his sketchbook as though it might fly away. One reporter shouted above the noise, "Mr. Caldwell, why credit a boy outside your company when this could be framed as your own family breakthrough?" Adrian's square jawline tightened, but his confident smile returned, warmer this time. Because leadership isn't about taking credit. It's about recognizing truth, no matter where it comes from. My son taught me that, and so did Kai. The hall fell into a hush. For once, the CEO's words weren't about markets or machines. They were about care, trust, and rhythm, things no quarterly report could measure. Miles blinked hard, his throat tight. Beside him, Kai whispered, almost in disbelief, "He said my name." And Adrian, standing tall at the podium, felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, the applause that followed wasn't for the empire he had built, but for the father he was learning to become. Night had settled over the penthouse, Chicago glittering below through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The balcony door was open an inch, letting a sliver of cool air brush the pages scattered across the carpet. Miles sat cross-legged, pencil tapping softly against his scratch paper, counting out the rhythm that had saved him. 1 and 2 and. Kai knelt nearby, sketchbook open, fingers drumming lightly, keeping pace. His eyes watched Miles, not to correct but to reinforce, a silent partner in the rhythm. The city's hum receded behind the simple, precise beat of pencil on paper. Adrian Caldwell entered quietly, sleeves rolled, still in his navy suit and red tie. He paused, watching the two boys. Normally, this room was a fortress of control. Polished steel, calculated schedules, walls that echoed authority. Tonight, it felt different, softer, alive with patience and effort. Miles glanced up and offered a small, unspoken acknowledgement. Adrian sank to the carpet beside them. "Show me again," he said, voice low, inviting rather than commanding. Miles demonstrated the MAPS method. Model the pieces, arrange the paths, picture the scenario, speak the steps in count. Pencil moved deliberately, breaths measured, confidence building in tiny, tangible increments. Adrian followed along, marking faint beats in the air with his hand, learning the rhythm in tandem. Kai smiled, letting the beat continue uninterrupted. He felt the tension in the room shift, the weight of expectations replaced by trust, by focus, by connection. Here, mistakes weren't punished. They were stepping stones. Miles paused at the end of a problem and exhaled. Steady, no panic. "That's it," he said quietly. I can keep this going." Adrian placed a hand on Miles's shoulder, a grounding, gentle gesture. "You don't need Ironbrook to learn discipline," he said softly. "You've learned rhythm. You've learned to lead yourself." For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence, the soft tap of a pencil and fingers marking the passage of time. No schedules, no grades, no looming threats, just steady breath, shared focus, and the beat of progress. Kai closed his sketchbook slowly, satisfied. Miles tapped out a final count, smiling faintly. Adrian, sitting upright, took in the lesson with a warmth rare in him. The penthouse felt like a studio now, a place for minds to breathe, for rhythms to be found, and for a family to grow in understanding. Outside, the city lights shimmered, distant and constant. Inside, a father had learned care, a son had found confidence, and a quiet boy had shown that the right rhythm could turn panic into clarity. Together, they had created something stronger than control. They had created connection. The balcony door whispered open, and the night settled around them. 1 beat, 2 beats. The rhythm continued.